Way back in 2012, Congress passed something called the Stock Act. The Stock Act was to force lawmakers to disclose their trades on the stock market within 45 days of making them. But new filings show members blowing past deadlines by months and, get this, even years, while still turning timely profits. The law originally was meant to enforce accountability and is highlighting how little there actually is. What a shocker. Take GOP Congressman Rob Bresnahan of Pennsylvania. He ran on banning stock trades in Congress, but since taking office, he's reported more than 260 trades worth over $7 million. When challenged, his response was that stopping would mean, in his words, going broke. Here was Texas State Representative James Tallarico calling out Bresnahan on Joe Rogan just last month.
Just saw the story about this congressman right before the big beautiful bill passed, and he sold all his stock in a company that does Medicaid reimbursements.
Oh, Jesus.
So
because you knew it was coming.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
crazy. That
yes.
Insider trading. And by the way, insider trading, everyone wants to use Nancy Pelosi as an example. She kind of gets used as an example just because she's been so good at it. But if you look at the actual insider trading, it's red and blue.
Yep.
It's the whole thing.
Yep.
It's filled with people that are benefiting.
And according to our friend Chris Josephs over at the Pelosi Tracker, since that sell, the stock has cratered and is now down 54%. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has countered that the credibility of Congress itself is at stake and has called this month for a ban on single stock trading by members of Congress. So what can be done? What with lawmakers promising reform while still cashing in, and a public left to wonder if anyone in Washington can be trusted to police themselves? Unfortunately, I think many of us know the answer to this, but joining us now is Peter Schweizer, investigative journalist and author of the timelier-than-ever classic, Throw Them All Out, How Politicians and Their Friends Got Rich Off Inside Stock Tips, Land Deals, and Cronyism that would send the rest of us to prison. The title says it all. Peter, welcome back.
Great to be with you as always. Thanks, Chanel.
This is such a sad angle of how Washington works, but it's a sad reality of how it has worked for decades, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, we all know that corruption takes place in Washington, D.C. Sometimes it's, unsophisticated and people go to jail. Insider trading on the stock market is a very sophisticated form of, I would argue, the same kind of graft. Because here's the bottom line, Chanel. If you work in corporate America, you cannot trade your own company's stock if you are privy to material non-public information. You're going to get investigated by the SEC. You're going to go to jail. Look what happened to Martha Stewart, for example. Compare that to members of Congress. You can literally write legislation on, say, healthcare policy that affects health companies, that affects pharmaceutical companies. And at the same time you're introducing that legislation, you know if it's going to pass, you know what the language is buried deep inside of that bill. You can trade that stock as much as you want. You can short stock, you can purchase stock, you can do whatever you want. It's the only really position of power in America where that kind of conflict of interest is ignored. And that's because members of Congress get to write their own rules. And that's the inherent problem.
I think I could name just a small handful of exceptions of lawmakers who have not heeded that siren call to cash in their offices, their political office on the stock market. But it is such a vortex. It's a siren call. Hardly any lawmaker escapes it. I mean, earlier in the segment, as I introduced this lawmaker out of Pennsylvania, he ran on combating this system, and yet he is sucked right in, saying he would go broke if he didn't.
Yeah, no, and look, Joe Rogan's right. This is a problem with Republicans and Democrats. It's not a red or blue problem. It's a green problem, as in money. But look, here is all that reformers like myself, I've been on this topic since 2011. All that we're really calling for is that members of Congress, they don't have to not be involved in the stock market, but they have to invest in broad index funds, the S&P 500, for example. And if they do that, they're going to do just fine. The problem is that a lot of them do much, much, much better than the broader market. Over the last 10 years, for example, the S&P index is up about 250%, so a very good rate of return. Nancy Pelosi's portfolio is up 723%. Now, if you look at if you look at the best minds on Wall Street, if you look at the Warren Buffetts of the world, less than 5% of them beat the market. Less than 5% of them would do better than that 250%. I don't think any of them have done 723%. And so the question is why? How is it that Nancy Pelosi and her husband, who I'm sure is a very fine businessman, but look, his business was he ran a limousine car service. That was the business that he ran when she entered Congress. They have access to inside information. They are trading stock options aggressively. That is leveraged bets that the market's going to go up and down. And guess what? They're almost always correct. So Pelosi is one example. There are others, but there is simply no plausible explanation as to why these people do consistently so much better than the market when highly paid professionals on Wall Street don't even come close.
That sounds like a plot line, a John Grisham plot line. You know, politician, her attorney or her husband who runs a limo service and it's all bugged and wired. I don't know if that was the case with the Pelosi's, but it sounds like a great plot. That said, I mean, I know you've studied and researched this for years. I mean, the book you wrote on this was, as you say, 2011. But is Nancy Pelosi the most glaring case of lawmakers profiting off of inside knowledge, or are there others that are more egregious?
She's a very, very good example of it. There are others. Tom Tillis, the senator from North Carolina, has engaged in, I would argue, some very questionable trades at key times. And oftentimes, Chanel, it happens around a point of national crisis. The 2008 financial crisis, for example, I showed that the ranking Republican on the House Financial Services Committee got a briefing from the Treasury Secretary in September of 2008, apocalyptic briefing, where Hank Paulson told a handful of congressional leaders, the market's going to go down. This financial crisis is real. This guy, the next day, went out and shorted the market, bet that it went down. And guess what? His bet was correct because he knew what the Treasury Secretary told him to expect. During the COVID crisis in 2020, Tom Tillis and others made some very specific bets and stock trades based on inside government information, I would argue, as to what they knew was coming. So they sold certain stocks, they bought other stocks, and they did quite well doing so. That's the classic definition of insider trading. So it's these crisis points. It's these small details that don't seem to matter much to all of us. Also, if a company's going to be, has a drug that is now going to be reimbursed for Medicare or Medicaid, that can have a huge effect on the stock price. If you're a member of Congress and you know that, and a lot of them are in a position to know that, they can trade that company's stock and make an absolute killing.
So, Peter, I know that you propose some solutions, but, some people just ask, why not just an absolute ban? And yes, that runs into some problems legally. You don't want to hamper the freedoms, the individual freedoms of lawmakers just because they're in that position. But that said, corruption always finds a way. You've done decades of research on that. Corruption will always find a loophole. And if even we put a ban on insider trading for lawmakers, as some of these laws have tried to propose, the easiest way around it will be spouses, kids, cousins, whoever, brothers and sisters. We saw that with the Biden family. There's always going to be a way around it. So is there a solution that is actually watertight, or is it just, we just have to be more transparent? What's the solution?
Yeah, there's no silver bullet, but I think we ought to have a clear-cut case that elected officials and senior bureaucrats and their spouses are not allowed to trade individual stock. They're not allowed to get IPO shares of stock, which Nancy Pelosi has done a lot over the years. They're not allowed to trade options. Yes. All that they can do is buy broad index funds, which is basically a fund that buys the entire market, the NASDAQ or whatever. And they can have bond funds, large bond funds. Other than that, there is no trading. I don't think you can extend this ban to adult children, to cousins and nephews, and there's going to be no silver bullet, but at least we can make it tougher on these people. And okay, somebody's cousin get rich, but let's try to at least make it so people have confidence that our elected officials are not acting the way they are right now. And look, there's a lot of resistance from Republicans and Democrats to these reforms, but I think we can get it done if there's enough public pressure.
Sounds like a great and novel solution, but Peter, as you and I both know, sometimes even the best solutions die in Washington because they are the best solutions. I hope that's not the case with this one. Peter, a pleasure as always. Thank you.